I've read a few of these reports through the years. I've never seen this kind of blistering, scathing language in this exhaustive a denunciation of a member of Congress. Usually their language is soft. It's ambiguous or gentle. This was not gentle. This was not soft. They didn't just say he acted unethically. They say he stole money. They didn't just say he had misconduct in office. They say he committed fraud. They said what they found paralleled the criminal case against him. And there are two headlines through the afternoon after the report came out. First of all, Santos says he's not running for re-election. He's not going to campaign for office again in 2024. And there's a growing number of his colleagues who did not vote to expel him earlier this month. They said they will now. His days could be numbered.
It's Ken Harbaugh with Against All Enemies on the MeidasTouch Network. George Santos is about to get kicked out of Congress if he doesn't resign first, which he won't. He has lashed out in an incredibly personal and vulgar way at fellow members of Congress, especially those serving on the Ethics Committee, which produced that damning report. So an expulsion resolution is going to the floor of the House any day now for a vote. This has been a long time coming, and I imagine that Republicans most of all will be happy to see him go. He has been an albatross around their necks since the day he was sworn in. Of course, they all chose to keep him around because they needed his vote. Republican leaders have known for a while who George Santos is, and they did nothing. But now that the details of his behavior are in full public view, they are finally moving to expel him. Even Fox News can no longer abide his lies. Here's a clip of a recent interview. The questioning is typically inane. It's Fox after all. But listen to the commentator say at the end, under her breath, you just can't tell the truth.
Speaking of peel, is it true that you have an OnlyFans page and you can peel a banana with your feet?
I don't have one, and it's, I'll indulge you this. I just discovered what OnlyFans was about 3 weeks ago when it was brought up in a discussion in my office.
What do you think?
And I was oblivious to the whole concept.
You just can't tell the truth.
I will be happy to see George Santos go, as will any American who believes that members of Congress from both sides should exhibit at least some basic standard of decorum and integrity. But the George Santos saga will not be over when he is expelled. He represents a new breed of conman in the mold of the former president, for whom shame is not a deterrent at all. It used to be that a charlatan like Santos was exposed, revealed for who he truly was, and that was it. The overwhelming negative attention provoked the kind of personal humiliation that forced a retreat from public life. What Donald Trump has shown people like George Santos and his coterie of fellow fraudsters like Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz is that you don't have to feel shame for anything. Here's what George Santos said when asked whether he would resign. I'm not leaving. These people need to understand it's done when I say it's done. Does that sound like anyone we know? Here's why the Santos story is important. It's not just one rogue Republican who is being driven out of Washington. George Santos is, in many ways, a reflection of the values of today's Republican Party and its leader, Donald Trump. Win at all costs. Never admit defeat. Attack anyone who dares to tell the truth about you. And most of all, wear shamelessness as a badge of honor. Here's what George Santos actually said about the coming expulsion vote. If you want to expel me, I'll wear it like a badge of honor. I'll be the 6th expelled member of Congress. This is literally something he's proud of. I spoke with a reporter, Mark Chiusano, who has followed Santos since his rise and exposed a number of his most egregious lies. I wanted to understand the larger implications of the Santos saga. My full interview with Mark will post soon. Give that a listen. It's a story almost too wild to believe. Here's a clip. Can you talk about the pattern that these cons follow? And I'm going to make a leap here, but I won't surprise you with it. When I think about George Santos and the smooth talking, followed by the con, followed by the bullying of his victims, I immediately think about the ultimate American con man, Donald Trump, who follows the exact same pattern. I want to read a quote from your book about a woman who was conned by George Santos And I think everyone is going to think about the Trump con as I read this. You wrote, it was the usual story she experienced, his charming and ingratiating side, and then a cheeky attempt, and finally his bitter, curse-filled invective. That's the con man's playbook.
That's right. And this is kind of the rise and fall with him all the time. You know, one of the most striking things that people told me, I talked to over 100 people who knew him for this book, and a lot of them said, you know, he's really charismatic. He's really tall. He's really friendly. He really knows how to kind of, you know, have a good time and sort of be part of a crowd. And so that's kind of part one, right? Where he kind of becomes friends with people. And then he'll kind of take and take and take. You know, it's funny you mentioned Donald Trump because he himself sees Trump as a mentor. Trump is kind of a constant figure that he's trying to model himself after, starting back in 2016 when Santos also got interested in politics. They kind of followed these parallel paths to national fame. And so I don't think it's a surprise that he's, you know, kind of followed this pattern.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I've got a quick break here, but I need a favor first. Shows like this depend on your support. Please, if you can spare 5 seconds, click the link to the podcast version of the show below and leave us a 5-star review. It really does help. Thanks. Do you think today's Republican Party was especially fertile ground for a person like George Santos, or is this just a feature of our politics writ large? I'm sure you know my take on this, but I would love your analysis.
Well, I do think that there are strains in American politics going back, you know, centuries, right? That allow for this kind of smooth talker, sort of hustler figure to do well, right? So that is a feature of American politics. Richard Hofstadter, the historian, wrote about the paranoid style, right, in American politics in the 60s. So this has been around for a while. I think what's different with Santos is that he was able to really, really skillfully just lie about issues, about himself, in a way that was very sort of alluring to the particularly Republican voter in his district right now. So there's a chapter in my book where I talk about the kind of political forces that boosted Santos. And this was an election, 2022, midterm election, where the Nassau and Queens Republicans were very, very angry about a whole bunch of things, particularly like COVID mitigations, right? They were very, very tired of COVID. There was a lot of sort of conspiracies being floated about anti-vax things. And, you know, sure, politicians always kind of fudge the truth a little bit or maybe even lie. But Santos didn't even have the problem of totally lying to different audiences on back-to-back nights. You know, he would just say whatever it took to get elected. And that particularly was helpful in the Republican primary and Republican Party this cycle.